She smiled as she signed the divorce papers, taking everything I had worked for. And the world expected me to break. Instead, I smiled back. My name is Ethan Miller. I'm 32 years old, and I had always believed that love was enough to build a life. I had believed that marriage meant partnership, trust, and shared dreams. I was wrong. My wife, Emily, the woman I had trusted with my heart and my future, had become the architect of my destruction. It started subtly. At first, it was small things I dismissed. The forgotten mentions of late-night work dinners, the casual critiques of my ambition, the tiny digs at my achievements. I told myself marriage wasn't perfect. I told myself I was overreacting. But over time, the small things became glaring signs. Then came the papers. A thin envelope slipped under the door one quiet morning. I picked it up and froze. The words on that page didn't just shock me, they shattered the life I had painstakingly built. Emily had taken everything. Our savings, the condo we renovated together, even the luxury car I had gifted her on our 5th anniversary. Every asset, carefully accumulated, was gone. I felt the first wave of anger, raw and consuming. My mind raced, imagining the look on her face as she plotted it all. But then, amidst the storm of disbelief, a strange calm settled over me. I read the papers again, and a thought formed odd, almost surreal. "I'll thank her," I whispered. It sounded insane, even as I said it aloud. But it wasn't gratitude for her betrayal. It was acknowledgement of a truth I had refused to see for years. Emily's actions, cruel and calculated as they were, gave me clarity. The betrayal that was meant to destroy me had instead become the spark that would ignite my comeback. The following weeks were a blur of legal consultations, moving boxes, and sleepless nights. Friends reached out, offering support and advice, but I kept most people at arm's length. This was a journey I had to navigate alone. I needed focus, precision, and patience. At night, I would sit in the empty apartment that used to be ours, staring at the walls that had once been filled with laughter. I replayed every argument, every late-night conversation, every warning sign I had ignored. I thought about how easily she had manipulated me, how skillfully she had taken control of our finances, our assets, our life together. And slowly, an idea began to form. This wasn't the end. This wasn't defeat. Emily had made a critical mistake. She underestimated me. She believed that taking everything would break me, but I realized that power didn't always come from holding assets. True power came from strategy, patience, and the ability to turn betrayal into opportunity. I began to plan. Not recklessly, not out of anger, but with a calculated, cold clarity. Every meeting, every decision, every conversation became a step toward reclaiming not just what she had taken, but my dignity, my confidence, and my life. The more I observed her behavior, her smug satisfaction, the little ways she flaunted her victory, the more I understood that revenge wasn't about making her suffer. It was about reclaiming my power quietly, strategically, and irreversibly. That night, as I sat alone, I made a vow. I wouldn't just survive this, I would thrive. And when the time came, I would let her see the man she had tried to destroy. Stronger, smarter, untouchable. It was a slow burn, a patient buildup, the kind that takes years of neglect, betrayal, and pain, and channels it into something unstoppable. Emily thought she had ended my story, but she had only begun the chapter that would define my rise. And so, the countdown began not for revenge and anger, but for the quiet, devastating victory of a man who refused to be broken. The morning after the divorce papers were finalized, I felt an unfamiliar clarity. The apartment was empty now, stripped of our shared memories, and the silence was deafening. Most people would see this as the end of everything: loss, failure, humiliation. But I felt something else: opportunity. I poured myself a cup of coffee and stared out the window at the city below. The skyline glittered, indifferent to my personal chaos. Emily had taken everything I thought defined me. The condo, the savings, the car, but she hadn't taken my mind, my skills, or my determination. That was something she could never steal. I started small. First, I sorted through my finances, salvaging whatever was left after the divorce. I reached out to old contacts, not to complain, but to rebuild quietly. I found a modest apartment downtown. Nothing flashy, just enough to remind me that I could start over without anyone dictating the pace. Meanwhile, Emily was busy flaunting her victory. Social media posts showed her dining in luxury restaurants, traveling to exotic locations, and hinting at how liberated she was without me. Friends and acquaintances sent me messages expressing sympathy, assuming I was defeated. They didn't know that I wasn't looking for sympathy, I was planning. It started subtly at first. I observed her behavior, noting her arrogance and her patterns. Every post, every boast, every smug smile revealed weaknesses. Greed, overconfidence, a belief that she had the upper hand. I cataloged it all in my mind, not for petty revenge, but to understand the landscape I was navigating. I also spent time reflecting on my own mistakes. Where had I gone wrong in our marriage? How had I allowed trust to blind me to manipulation? Understanding my past failures became a tool, a foundation to build strength and strategy. This wasn't just about winning back what was taken. It was about emerging, smarter, more resilient, untouchable. I reconnected with people I had once underestimated. Mentors, colleagues, and friends I had neglected over the years suddenly became resources not just for networking, but for insight and guidance. I realized that true power wasn't in money or status alone. It was in connections, knowledge, and foresight. Then came the planning. I didn't want a public confrontation, a lawsuit, or a scandal. My revenge would be quiet, deliberate, and devastatingly effective. Every step I took would be calculated. Each move measured to reclaim my dignity without stooping to petty insults. The more I observed Emily, the more I understood her weaknesses. She thrived on appearances and superficial validation. She believed she could humiliate me publicly and erase my accomplishments from memory. That arrogance would be her undoing. At night, I would sit with my notebook, writing down every thought, every plan, every small opportunity. I wasn't driven by anger. I was guided by clarity. Revenge wasn't about making her suffer. It was about proving to myself that I was capable of rising, unshaken and unstoppable, no matter what she threw at me. Weeks turned into months. I rebuilt my life incrementally. Small victories accumulated, reconnecting with old business contacts, finishing a major project that had been stalled during our marriage, and slowly, quietly, building a network of support that Emily could not touch. Each small win was a reminder. She could take my possessions, but she could not take my ambition, my intelligence, or my resilience. And through it all, I never showed my hand. Emily continued to parade her supposed victory, oblivious to the quiet storm gathering around her. She didn't realize that the man she had underestimated was already preparing a comeback that would make her arrogance look foolish. By the end of the year, I had transformed my grief and humiliation into focus and strength. The man who collapsed at the thought of losing everything had become someone disciplined, patient, and strategically unstoppable. Emily might have thought she had won, but she was walking straight into a future I was already shaping. I smiled quietly to myself one night as I reviewed my progress. The irony was delicious. The very woman who had tried to destroy me had inadvertently created the conditions for my greatest triumph. This was only the beginning. The slow, deliberate revenge I had envisioned was already in motion, and Emily, blinded by her ego and greed, had no idea what was coming. I didn't rush. That was the first rule I set for myself. People like Emily thrived on speed, fast decisions, quick pleasures, instant validation. I, on the other hand, learned patience the hard way. Losing everything had taught me something invaluable. The man who waits controls the game. From the outside, my life looked modest. A small apartment, no flashy car, no dramatic posts online. Friends assumed I was recovering. Emily certainly did. That illusion was necessary. Behind the scenes, I was rebuilding something far more dangerous than money leverage. It started with work. During our marriage, Emily had pushed me to abandon a long-term consulting project, calling it unstable and beneath us. I went back to it quietly. The clients remembered me. More importantly, they trusted me. Within months, the project evolved into a private advisory role. High-paying, discreet, and completely outside Emily's radar. While she posted champagne glasses and beachfront sunsets, I built infrastructure. Then came the first opening. A mutual friend mentioned, almost casually, that Emily was planning to start a lifestyle brand. Wellness, empowerment, independent woman, energy. I almost laughed. She had always mocked my patience, my planning. Now she wanted to build something that required both. That was when I saw it, the crack in the armor. Emily needed credibility. She needed partners. She needed capital, and she needed someone she thought was harmless. I didn't approach her. That would have been too obvious. Instead, I let my name resurface organically. A former colleague praised my work in a professional circle. Emily followed. A mentor mentioned me at a networking dinner she attended. Slowly, subtly, I re-entered her world not as her ex-husband, but as a resource. The message reached me exactly as I expected. Hey, hope you've been well. I heard you're doing consulting again. Polite, casual, curious. I waited 2 days before replying. Yeah, keeping busy. Hope everything's going well for you. No bitterness, no resentment. That alone unsettled her. Over the next few weeks, she reached out more. Questions about the industry, about investors, about strategy. I answered just enough to appear helpful. Never eager. I let her believe she was in control. She wasn't. What Emily didn't know was that the advisory group I worked with had already reviewed her proposed brand concept. Weak structure, over-leveraged projections, overconfidence baked into every assumption. She was building a house on sand, and she wanted my help to do it. I agreed to consult informally. No contracts, no paper trail, just conversations, ideas, suggestions. I nudged her toward faster expansion, riskier partnerships. I knew exactly which levers to pull because I'd lived with her long enough to understand her fatal flaw. She hated slow progress. Meanwhile, I protected myself. Every conversation was documented, every suggestion framed as optional, every decision clearly hers. I wasn't sabotaging her. I was letting her be herself. The more confident she became, the sloppier she got. She ignored warnings from others, dismissed conservative advice, pushed forward aggressively, convinced success was inevitable. One night, after a call where she bragged about her inevitable breakthrough, I sat back in my chair and exhaled slowly. The trap was set, and still I felt no joy, no thrill, just focus. Revenge, I realized, wasn't loud. It wasn't fueled by rage or insults. It was quiet, clinical, almost boring. What kept me grounded was the memory of that morning, the divorce papers, the empty apartment, the way she had looked at me like I was already erased. She thought taking everything had made her powerful. She was wrong, because power isn't about what you take. It's about what you build after losing it all. By the time Emily realized she had built her empire on unstable ground, I would already be gone. Untouched, untied, and finally ahead. And when it collapsed, I wouldn't say a word. I had already thanked her once. Emily was confident, overly confident. Every social media post screamed success. The launch of her lifestyle brand, glamorous photo shoots, press features. Friends congratulated her. Investors praised her ambition, and she basked in the illusion of victory. But the cracks were already forming. I watched silently from the sidelines, maintaining the perfect balance of distance and accessibility. She had asked for my guidance, unwittingly handing me the tools to observe her weaknesses. Every careless decision, every ignored warning, every overambitious deadline was cataloged in my mind. She underestimated patience. She underestimated strategy. She underestimated me. The first public sign of trouble came subtly. A press article highlighted a major partnership Emily had touted as secured. In reality, the deal was conditional, contingent on funding she hadn't fully secured. Investors began asking questions, hard questions. The social media narrative shifted subtly from praise to skepticism. Emily noticed. The panic in her calls was audible. "Ethan, do you think I'm overreacting?" I replied calmly, measured. "You need to review the conditions carefully. Make sure nothing is overlooked." She interpreted my tone as helpful, supportive, harmless, perfect. Days later, a critical supplier pulled out, citing doubts about her long-term viability. Another investor hesitated, requesting extensive audits before releasing funds. Her confident posts became defensive captions. The image she had carefully crafted was beginning to fracture, and she had no idea I had anticipated every step. Even closer to home, personal relationships began to strain. Friends who had once praised her judgment now questioned her impulsiveness. Mentors she had dismissed approached me privately, seeking my insight, revealing the growing instability in her ventures. And through it all, I remained calm, invisible, patient, observing. I didn't need to attack. The foundations she had built on ego, impatience, and overconfidence were crumbling on their own. My revenge was quiet, but devastating. Then came the first real confrontation. Emily called me in tears, frustrated, panicked. "I don't understand how this happened. I followed all the advice, all your suggestions. How did it collapse?" I leaned back, measured. "I told you to be cautious. You were warned. Sometimes, ambition without patience leads to failure." She didn't realize the irony. Every decision she had made, every risky move had been influenced by me. And every move was calculated to expose the instability she had ignored for years. The day her first major investor publicly withdrew support, social media lit up with speculation. Headlines subtly undermined her brand. Lifestyle brand falters amid funding concerns. Rising star faces early setback. Every post she had made projecting success now contrasted painfully with reality. Through it all, I remained untouched. My consulting projects flourished. My network expanded quietly. I wasn't basking in her failure. I was living my life, empowered, free from the chains of anger or resentment. But the most devastating impact was emotional. Emily had believed she could humiliate me, diminish my accomplishments, and assert dominance over my life. Instead, she had built her empire on her own flaws. Every collapse, every investor retreat, every failed partnership reflected not just on her, but on the very arrogance that had led her to underestimate me. By the end of the quarter, Emily's brand was reeling. Public confidence faltered. Investors hesitated. Even close allies began whispering doubts. And I had done nothing overt. No confrontation, no public call-out. Just patience, observation, precision. I had warned her once gently, subtly, and she hadn't listened. Now, the consequences were undeniable. I realized, as I sipped my coffee one quiet morning, that revenge didn't need drama or theatrics. It didn't require insults, arguments, or exposure. True revenge, the kind that changes lives quietly but completely, was built on restraint, intelligence, and allowing someone to fail by their own hand. Emily had taken everything she thought would empower her, but it was her own decisions, amplified by her arrogance, that led to collapse. And I had been there every step of the way, watching, learning, and preparing for the final act. The slow burn was almost complete. The world she had built on ambition without foundation was beginning to crumble, and she had no one to blame but herself. And I was ready for the final step. The morning sun slanted through the blinds of my office, painting streaks of gold across the floor. Emily had called yet again, her voice strained, desperation thinly veiled behind forced composure. I listened politely, giving her just enough attention to encourage her to speak, to reveal her own missteps. "I don't understand, Ethan," she said, frustration seeping through. "Everything I built, it's falling apart. You promised you'd help me." I leaned back in my chair, calm, composed, untouchable. "I told you to proceed cautiously. I offered guidance, but every choice was yours. Every risk you ignored, every warning dismissed. All your own doing." Her silence spoke volumes. She realized, finally, that she had been playing with a man far more patient, far more strategic than she ever imagined. She had believed I was broken, defeated. She had believed she had won, but the truth had been simmering quietly, waiting for the perfect moment to emerge. Over the next few days, her brand crumbled publicly. Investors pulled out completely. Partnerships dissolved. Social media buzz shifted from admiration to speculation, then to criticism. The empire she had flaunted was nothing but a fragile illusion, dismantled by her own arrogance. And yet, I felt no joy in her downfall. The pleasure of revenge was in the precision, the inevitability, the quiet truth. I had reclaimed my life, not through anger, not through humiliation, but through patience, strategy, and self-mastery. I took the day off, walked through the streets of the city, feeling the freedom I had fought so quietly to achieve. The divorce had taken everything materially, but in exchange, it had given me clarity, discipline, and perspective. Then came the final encounter. Emily showed up at a neutral location, ostensibly to discuss her failing brand. I met her in the lobby, composed, professional. She tried to negotiate, to manipulate, to plead. Every tactic she had once used on me now fell flat. Her words, once sharp and cutting, seemed almost pathetic in their desperation. I listened quietly. Then I spoke. "Emily," I said softly, "you taught me something important. You taught me patience. You taught me strategy. You taught me that even when everything is taken from you, the most valuable thing, your mind, your focus, your dignity, cannot be stolen. Thank you." Her jaw tightened. She didn't understand. She would never understand. That simple acknowledgement, that calm, composed gratitude, was the ultimate sting. I had thanked her not for kindness, but for revealing the path to my empowerment. She left, defeated, powerless, humiliated without a single public insult. The empire she had built on arrogance and haste lay in ruins. I watched her go, knowing that I had achieved exactly what I intended. Not revenge for the sake of anger, but vindication through mastery, patience, and self-determination. That evening, I stood on my balcony overlooking the city. The skyline glimmered, indifferent to human affairs, yet I felt a quiet victory. I had rebuilt my life from the ashes of betrayal. I had grown stronger, smarter, untouchable, and I had done it all without losing myself to rage. The lesson was clear. Power is not taken. It is cultivated. Respect is not demanded. It is earned. And revenge, true revenge, is not about destruction, but about rising above, proving that nothing can break you when you refuse to be broken. Emily had taken everything she thought would define me, but in the end, it was she who was defined by her own mistakes, her own arrogance, her own haste. I had lost nothing, and yet gained everything: peace, freedom, and the quiet, unshakable satisfaction of being the man she never realized I could be. I smiled quietly. The world expected pain, anger, and despair. Instead, it received calm, control, and victory. And that was the ultimate revenge.